Today we're going to learn about another percent application called percent of change, which you actually see all around you all the time. So anytime you see a sale price 10% off, it's actually a percent of change. It's a 10% decrease from the original amount. So if we start here with our vocabulary words, percent of change, it's the amount stated as a percent that a number increases or decreases. So thinking along the same lines, we can have a percent of increase. So if the amount goes up, that amount of change is a percent of increase. If it's a sale and the percent is going down, it's a percent of decrease. Okay, so how we're going to find this percent of change? We can take the amount of change over the original amount, and what we're actually going to have to do is we're actually going to have to multiply that by 100%, or that's going to give us a decimal. So to change a decimal to a percent, move the decimal 2 places to the right and add a percent sign. So first thing in this first section, just 2 of these. We first want to identify the percent of change as an increase or decrease, and then we want to find the percent of change. So if I have an original amount of 250 and a new amount of 145. Okay, first, if I go from 250 to 145, well, let's think, is that increasing or decreasing? Okay, well, 250 to 145 is obviously a decrease, so this is going to be a percent of decrease. So there's the first thing. Okay, now remember, if we want to find percent of change, we're going to put the amount of change over the original amount, which is probably the hardest thing to kind of nail into your brain. So we're going to put the original amount in the denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in there already because that's probably the part that messes up the most. The original amount goes in the denominator. Okay, the amount of change I'm looking for. How much did it change? So if you take 250 minus 145, you get 105. Okay, whenever I take 105 divided by 250, you should get 42 hundredths. And if I want to change that to a percent, move the decimal 2 places, add a percent sign. So if I have an original amount of 250, a new amount of 145, the percent of decrease is 42%. Okay, what about this time if I have an original of 150 and a new of 189. Okay, well, first thing, from 150 to 189, is that an increase or a decrease? Hopefully you can identify that as an increase. It's getting larger. Okay, to find the percent of change, remember we're going to put the amount of change over the original. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in my original. That way I don't get it messed up. And the amount of change, I just want to know how much did it change. So between 189 and 150, it changes 39. And when you take 39 divided by 150, you would get 26 hundredths. And we're always looking for a percent. So move that decimal over 2 places, add a percent sign, and you get 26%. Okay, so we can find percent of change. That's one big point today. We can also find a new amount, which is probably the more applicable part of this section. So if I want to find, I want to increase 115 by 40%. Okay, so if I want to increase 115 by 40%, I'm going to have to take 115 and I'm going to increase 115 by 40%. So what that means is I have the 115 and then I need to find 40% of 115. I need to add them together because it is an increase. So I first need to figure out what 115 times 40% is. So I'm going to take 115 plus, but remember we don't want to multiply with percents. Instead, I want to change it to a decimal. So I'm going to take 115 plus, and whenever you take 115 times 4/10, you get 46. 115 plus 46 gives you 161. Okay, we can do the same thing, but we can decrease the number. So if I want to decrease 85 by 28%, this time I'm going to take that 85 and I'm going to subtract 28% of 85 because it is a decrease. So I'm going to subtract 28% of my number. Okay, so I'm going to take 85 minus, and let's go ahead and change that 28% to a decimal. And when you find 28% of 85, you get 23 and 8/10. And when you subtract those two numbers, you get 61 and 2/10. Okay, now we're going to get more into this in the next section, but we can go ahead and start applying this stuff now. If I know the regular price of a coat is $120, it's on sale for 25% off. What is the sale price? So basically what I'm being asked to find is, I know that I'm going to decrease, because it's a sale, I'm going to decrease 120 by 25%. So let's think along that very last example. I'm going to take 120 and I'm going to decrease, I'm going to subtract. Now I need to find out what 25% of 120 is. Okay, so I'm going to take 120, let's change that 25% to a decimal, and when you find 25% of 120, you should get 30, and 120 minus 30 is 90, so that coat is $90 on sale.